right. All right. I just got the note that we are live. So I want to welcome everyone to this webinar. My name's Donna Bowman. We're going to be talking about how to use an MBA to make career change or pivot. So just going to jump right in. It's an important topic. One thing I will tell you is that I've seen so many of my clients successfully make some amazing transitions. So I'm really excited to get into this and give you some ideas and tips so that you too can successfully pivot and change your career through an MBA. Most of you probably know me if you've been on various GMAT Club events before, but my name's Donna Bowman. I'm a senior admissions counselor with Stratus. I have a leadership storytelling facilitation. So I'm a story facilitator, which helps me draw out questions from clients and help people sort of tell compelling stories. I also come to this from having admissions experience at UNC Kenan-Flagler. Prior to that, I worked in CPG and advertising. And you can see where I have my degrees, proud Kellogg and UNC Kenan-Flagler undergrad. So a little bit about Stratus. We think about Stratus that really is helpful, I think, for you to know is that we're very collaborative. We're probably the most collaborative of all the admissions consulting firms. When you work with us, you are going to work with not just your counselor, but at the right time, someone who knows Kellogg really well, or someone who knows Wharton really well, or Harvard, or whatever school you're interested in. So that's helpful. And then the other thing that we do, and this is a good time of year for people who are, thinking about applying for round one next year. If you are all in with us and you sign up with 4 schools or more, we actually will work with you in that round. And if for any reason you're either waitlisted or denied, we will actually work with you for 2 schools for free in round 2. And that's because we really want to see people, have a successful outcome and make a successful transition. So with that, I'm going to jump into what we're going to talk about today. And I really do encourage you, I'm going to be watching the chats in the comment section to ask me questions and along the way. But what we're going to talk about is just areas that you're being evaluated in very briefly, because the more you are at the top of those areas of evaluation, the more likely I think schools are willing to work with you on pivots and changes of any kind. But most importantly, we're going to talk about what makes a good goal statement. And then we're going to go into a lot of case studies of people who have made career changes and pivots. And I'm going to sort of explain the difference between those. And then we'll wrap up with how Stratus can help you, or just answering any questions that you have. So with that, areas of evaluation. So there's things like, academic and quantitative readiness. And you can think about, even in your preparations, like, okay, if I want to switch into investment management and I've been an accountant, maybe go back and think about, were you involved in an investment club when you were in undergrad, or did you have some kind of extracurricular experience? And you want to be thinking about how you can take what you have and build it into what you get from the MBA to help you be successful. Another area is work experience and global exposure. So again, if you have perhaps some expertise, in healthcare, and now, and it was in consulting, but you're looking to do something in the healthcare industry directly, maybe pull some of that experience. Leadership is always important, and something that, community engagement and leadership is super important. Recommenders, remember that your recommenders can help you to get to make that transition. So, have your recommenders understand why you would be able to be successful in making the transition. And they can be a big help in your process too. Obviously, your goals and your essays are very important, and that's going to be giving schools the information that they need. I see a question already, how to show global exposure in your essay if your work experience is limited to your country. Okay, so that's a great question. So sometimes even if you work in country, a lot of companies are multinational, and you have perhaps some experience working with a team, even if it's just virtual. So you could be talking about that, or you could be, just showing global curiosity. So, any opportunity to learn about a different area of the world. Again, there's never been more opportunities, especially since post-COVID, to get information and gather information virtually. So that's hopefully, Vishal, that gives you a little bit of a answer to the question. And if you want more, just send me a message and I'll pick up. All right, so let's jump in. And I want to get here pretty quickly to what makes a good goals statement. So there's several things. You want it to be ambitious, but yet achievable. And so what do I mean by that? Well, it's ambitious to say that I want to, change through my MBA to get into venture capital. But let's say you were Teach for America, person, and so you have an education background. While it's ambitious to say you want to get into venture capital, how achievable is it that you're going to make such a big jump to go from being in the classroom to being in DC? So for example, it might be that you want to think about, I want to leverage my education background and I want to work perhaps in a technology company like Adobe or Google and work in their education area, where perhaps you're a liaison to getting Google or Adobe products into schools, right? So you're working with schools, you're leveraging that background. Then you have sort of maybe some ed tech experience because you're in education and you're in tech. And then that second transition to be able to perhaps work in startups in ed tech space in VC makes more sense. So it's really helpful to be, again, it is good to have an ambitious goal, because people who go to business school, you're ambitious and you want to make a change, but try to be realistic about sense and what will an admissions team believe is something that's attainable. Because if they don't feel that you can make that transition through your MBA, they may not want to, they may say, oh, we don't think we can help this person. So then you're sort of, dead in the water before you really had a chance to share your whole story. Short-term goal, you want to be specific, right? So a specific company. So I want to be a product manager in a company like Airbnb. I want to join a strategy consulting firm like Carney or Monitor, Deloitte, or Bain as an associate. Your long-term goal, what do you want to do aspirationally? So like at the pinnacle of your career, where do you hope to end up? Maybe it's something like, I want to lead product development at a consumer-facing retailer, or the CFO of a global nonprofit that's impacting food insecurity. So really don't just, really give some detail. Don't just kind of generally say something very broad, like I want to work in consulting. That's just not specific enough. Let's see. Last one leads to, these goals should lead into kind of why you need an MBA, and then the research of why a particular school or particular program could help you make that transition. Let's go ahead and look a little bit more in depth at some of these goal statements, and I'll talk about them. And here's two examples. So first one, short-term goal, I want to be an associate operations manager at a CPG firm like P&G or PepsiCo. And in the long term, I want to be at a similar firm to address growing operational challenges in the CPG industry, such as sustainable sourcing, waste reduction, or automation. Okay. This another completely different kind of person who has perhaps a background in consulting and in, sort of risk management. In the short term, I want to innovate in the payments industry by improving access to affordable financial services for underbanked populations around the world by becoming a product manager at a fintech payments company such as TransferWise. In the long term, I want to leverage my experience in fintech to join a venture capital firm and specialize in financial services related investments. And in this second case, I've got a question, so I'm going to jump in. Corporate and finance paralegal here. If I scored 1 point below in quantitative reasoning from my median target school, is that frowned upon in admissions? One of the good things that I think is a trend and this is Big Mike, schools are really looking very holistically. I would not worry so much about any micro 1 point here, there, one score. I just look at the big picture here. So, I mean, if that's, no, is it frowned upon? No. And is it realistic to go from corporate and finance paralegal to investment banking? So that's, it could be actually I actually had a guy that I worked with who went, and we're going to talk about his example in a little bit, went from working as an accountant in sort of a niche sort of wealth management and sort of financial planning firm and was able to make a transition into investment banking. A lot of this would depend upon kind of, you perhaps picking a school that is good at helping people make transitions. In the case of the guy I worked for, this is plug perhaps for UCLA Anderson. They have a really strong Parker Career Management Center, and he was able to, they just had a really good sort of playbook for people to be able to sort of take the right courses, go through knowing what to expect and what to do next in the recruiting process. I think it would be really important for you to maybe take some financial modeling courses even prior to going to business school to show that you have that interest and desire. Because obviously in the sort of day-to-day paralegal work, that's not something that you're going to be doing, but you can do some things prior to getting into business school. Wall Street Oasis, Training the Street, those are all kinds of companies that will provide some training to people to kind of get a little bit of a jump up. And what you can do is by taking some of those trainings, show a school on the way in that you're really serious about wanting to make that transition and doing everything that you can and hit the ground running. It also would help if you had a really strong quantitative profile to be able to show them that you're going to be able to make that leap into investment banking. So if you haven't taken, financial accounting, if you haven't taken microeconomics, those are also things that you could be trying to get more expertise. Obviously, you're going to be taking some of those courses when you're in your MBA program. But I do think, I don't see any reason why you couldn't potentially be successful, Mike. And that's something where it's really important to pick schools that are going to, have a good track record. Look at employment reports and see what percentage of people are going into investment banking at some of the schools that you're interested in. And that could also help you land in a place where you're going to have the best chance to succeed. So jumping back, I think we talked about these goal statements, again, being very specific and really showing there's something that I like to say, and I think one of my colleagues first shared with me, specificity equals credibility. So the more specific and the more I can see as an admissions person that you've done your homework, that you really understand what's involved and that you understand what kinds of resources I have as an MBA program that are going to help you get there, the more you can be successful in making that transition. So let me jump to the next slide. We're going to talk about, we talk about making a pivot or change, and we sort of use that a little bit interchangeably, but I'd like to sort of introduce this idea of these sort of 4 buckets, if you will, 4 boxes, company size, the level, the geography that you're in, the industry, and the function. And in that, the more boxes that you change, the more it's a career change, right? The more that you're just changing maybe 1 or 2, and perhaps more like changing the company size or level or changing your geography. So you're making a pivot through the MBA, but you're not making a full scale, change. I would say that a full scale change would be more where you're changing your industry, you're changing your function. MBAs, you can be people have made successful pivots and changes through their MBA. So I think you can do either. And I thought it would be fun to kind of go through a couple of examples, all right, that for you to get a sense of people that we've worked with who have made these successful pivots and changes. So first one, talking about a person who basically, actually, let me get this right, had a more of a pivot here. The person studied engineering at a top Canadian school, worked as an engineer at a consulting firm that focused on improving equipment and facilities of large CPG companies, right? So sort of had an engineering, manufacturing background, but really understood CPG, right? And wanted to use an MBA to be able to transition into working as an associate operations manager at a CPG company like P&G or PepsiCo, and long-term wanting to be COO at a similar firm to address growing operational challenges in the CPG industry, such as sustainable sourcing, waste reduction, and automation. So let's just kind of go through. So making a geography change from Canada to United States, making a company level change, working from a small firm to a large multinational firm, but wanting to stay in the CPG industry and leveraging that CPG experience, and basically staying, operational. So not still focusing on sort of that operations background, but being able to transition and work in CPG. So that's one example. I'm seeing a couple questions, so let me see if I can jump in. What are the good schools to pivot to investment banking from an engineer company like GE? Also, can you please advise on what I can do to prepare for this transition and any minimum score or course recommendations? Okay. So I think GE has, and I don't know if you're speaking of, like, I think they have a really strong sort of financial leadership program. So I'm not sure, Harshit, if you were involved in that or if you were on the engineering side. But I think the fact that you have a really strong quantitative background could be a good thing. And I answered this question a little bit earlier, I think, to Big Mike, in that don't wait just to get into the MBA to sort of go from zero to like, now I'm going to do all investment banking. There are some things that you can do along the way. And this also can show the school from the admission side that you're serious about it. So, one of the things that you can do now is and this is a great time of year to do this. A lot of the schools, everybody who's in a business school right now is experienced. So the first years are at least one, semester or a couple of, mods under their belt. And the second years are almost finished. So almost every school has a student ambassador, MBA ambassadors group. And I would definitely encourage you to sort of start reaching out to people in the investment banking club and asking them questions like, well, what kinds of successful transitions have you seen people in the school do to work in investment banking? Find out, look at how active clubs are. Some clubs are making more, treks, like, going to visit more information that they're providing in terms of what you need to do to be prepared. And again, on this topic, I was just having a conversation with one of my former clients who did make a successful transition to investment banking and was a UCLA Anderson grad. So that is, something to perhaps file away. I know from when I worked at UNC Kenan Flagler, really strong investment banking curriculum, really strong networking, alums who were very helpful. Definitely look at the employment reports, look at, do that research and have those conversations. You can, again, brush up and make sure that you're, sort of building your Excel skills and financial modeling skills, because that's going to help you jump in and be able to make that transition. Obviously, in the MBA programs itself, you're going to be able to build those skills a little bit further. In terms of Q87 on the new GMAT, again, if you have strong, don't worry so much about what your test scores are. I also have some really great stories and examples of several of my clients who have gotten not just accepted to top schools like Ross and Darden, but substantial scholarships in some cases with a test waiver. So not saying that the test isn't important. Obviously, that's one piece of it. But if you want to make a transition, really, I like to also tell people to find their doppelganger. So look for people who are in MBA programs who are ambassadors and maybe have a career interest or trajectory that is similar to yours. So maybe they were an engineering background and they made a transition into investment banking. So find that person, in the MBA ambassadors, and reach out to them and say, what were the courses here that were really helpful? What were the best professors that you had? What were the best resources? And if you do that in a couple places and you really build that up, by the time you're ready to actually, write essays and applications, which if we're talking about round 1 is several months away. If we're talking about round 3, then, it's happening in real time and you need to be working on that as soon as you get off this webinar. But if you have, when you're ready, when you have to do that, if you've had these conversations and you've done your research and you take good notes and you can reference them, it really can make you, as someone who used to read these as on the school side, when someone took the time to kind of know what firms are recruiting at these MBA programs. And you can do that by looking at a school's employment report. So again, really dig in and do your homework. And when you do that, by the time you actually are applying, it really does come through and you can just tell the difference. I'm going to switch now to another guy, and this is someone I worked with several years ago, but was someone who basically, in terms of background, was worked in a multinational company, wanted to basically work in, wanted to go into ultimately wanted to make a switch long-term to VC, but started with sort of product management in a fintech firm. So that was sort of and had a strong background in understanding consulting to financial services institutions and issues around money laundering and just risk management and things that were going to be relevant to fintech startups. Was open to any geography, was basically moving from consulting function to operations, and into sort of a product management role. This person, I was actually amazed, went to Chicago Booth, and because the curriculum at Booth is so flexible, so the person could kind of take whatever they wanted to build their own curriculum, was able to do a lot of in-semester internships with VC, was able to actually, and Booth also sometimes will have the pre-MBA internships. So sometimes people are able to actually get some experience with a startup even prior to going to business school. So if you're looking to make a big change, it's great to look at programs that have a lot of opportunities to work while you're do an internship in semester. There are other schools where if you're doing like heavy case method and lots of reading and demands in the classroom, it could be more challenging to be doing an internship during the semester. So if you're trying to make a big transition, that might be something to keep in mind, to look at the schools where you can have several, whether it's being in a venture capital lab or private equity lab, and you're actually working with a private equity firm, that could, during the semester, that could help. I see a question here also. I'm looking to earn an MBA, preferably from an M7. Have had any MBA, EMBA clients? If so, were able to leverage and pivot, and how did they do so? Yeah, absolutely. I think that more and more people who are going to, who are in EMBA programs are less likely to be sponsored by their employer. More likely, if you're paying for it yourself, then you're maybe looking to do more of an actual change. So I had a client recently who, and just ironically, the first one that's coming up to my head is also Booth, who had a strong engineering background and wanted to get into product management in tech, and sort of leveraging some of their tech background, but transitioning into a product management role. And in terms of checking in with him, it sounds like he's still in the program, but on his way to making a change, and is finding the resources and the community there, Booth, to be extremely helpful. Let's see. I'm in banking in middle office, risk management and compliance, would like to do front office post MBA. Yeah. So again, you're at least halfway there in that you have some industry experience. And then what you really need to do is build functional skills. So that again would be things like, looking to improve, even if it means in the short term, taking a financial modeling course on your own online, having a lot of, there's also a lot of relationship building in this. And so that, people who are looking for like a quick, there isn't always like a quick answer to this, but it's, if you want to do this, then, perhaps have conversations in your own firm with people you trust privately to say, okay, what kinds of, skills and what kinds of training would you like me to have to be able to be more competitive to get into one of the front office positions post MBA? Sometimes my first job was actually at Morgan Stanley years and years ago, and I was in sort of an investment, like an information systems analyst program. It was very, very difficult to kind of, people not moving around. You're not moving. I did have some people that I knew that did make that change, but for the most part, an MBA would be a really great way to do that. And again, look for programs that have, also look at the coursework, that there's a good, robust amount of coursework. Most MBA programs, and it's interesting that I'm getting so many questions about investment banking today, because you don't see as many people lately, at least I haven't in our sort of client flow of people that perhaps are wanting to transition into investment banking. But it's always been a mainstay of what MBA programs do. And actually just now thinking about another client, I worked with a guy who was a consultant at IBM, really didn't have any investment banking background, was really passionate about environment, and wanted to actually work in a green investment bank. And, was very successful. Actually, he went to UNC Keene-Flagler and was able to leverage his interest in green and then the curriculum and just sort of going through the investment banking recruiting process, and was able to work at a firm, a specialty firm in Chicago, where he's doing, investment banking with a green, sustainable focused. So, and the things that he did were, again, just, doing that research, having those conversations with people, building your network. So kind of, you can't start doing that early enough. LinkedIn is also a great way for people to kind of figure some of this out. So wherever you went to your undergrad, or wherever you have your career network, you could type in your school. You could type in, investment banking associate, or you could type in, Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs, or, whatever, UBS. You could type in that and find out, who do I have in my network, or maybe as a second or third connection that I might be able to kind of begin to have some conversations and get some advice about the things that I can do to build skills and make more successful. But I would say business school is a great place to go. There's lots of good curriculum, lots of, just historical interest to be able to make a successful transition into investment banking. All right, so let me switch to a different example. Actually, it's funny that we're switching. This is, again, the client that I was referring to that actually had an accounting background and was, interested in switching into investment banking, wanted to stay on the West Coast, had leveraged, had a tax function expertise, but was able to sort of transition into an investment banking role, move from venture capital in understanding partnership taxation issues to investment banking, but he leveraged his financial services industry background. And he was the one who was telling me just how much support there was in terms of just, first years meeting with the Career Management Center, mock interviews and preps with second year students, and just kind of helping people understand every step of the recruiting process. Let's see, got another question here. Is it possible to pivot after a 1-year MBA program? So I'm not sure, Afna, what you mean by pivot after a 1-year MBA program. I mean, obviously, if you go into a 1-year MBA program, usually people who go into 1-year MBA programs, they're trying to make a sort of a smaller change, right? Because you don't have time to do the internship and really that full on transition of maybe going to a completely different industry and function. So most people that are doing a 1-year, like I said, are doing sort of a pivot. And an example of that might be, someone who does have a, corporate finance position, and maybe they are just looking to perhaps change their industry function through an MBA, or perhaps just advance. In some cases, it just helps in your career profile, to be at the MBA level. So banking and consulting are industries where, it can just help to sort of put you into that next level of promotions and professional track, where getting an MBA is helpful, but the person isn't really looking to change, drastically. Okay, so I've got another question. I've got Hermont I'm 36 years old and I'm an investigative journalist. I want to get into consulting MBB, preferably after an executive MBA. At my age, is it even realistic to aspire to get into consulting? 2 of my big stories have led to policy level changes, and one has exposed massive corruption in banks. And then he's giving me his GMAT score. So I would say, being an investigative journalist, those are great, problem solving, skills. And particularly if you have great experience in a particular industry. So I was just talking, actually last night, I was catching up with one of my clients who made, and I don't even have her example on here, but actually a pretty big career change. She had worked a lot in, she had a military background. She also worked a lot in sort of governmental sort of advancing, public partnerships. And actually, I think some expertise in with VA, working, with veterans. And so she was able to go into, and she's had exceptional leadership, really exceptional leadership, and was able to transition through her MBA to be able to get a job with McKinsey. And this is, without necessarily having like stats off the charts or anything like that. But what made her attractive to top tier consulting firm was the depth of knowledge that she had around, VA as issue and military background. And that was something that I think set her apart. So again, if you can think, Hemant, of something where you have expertise and perhaps ideas of how to, like ideas of how a problem should be solved, then what you can learn in an MBA is, perhaps a little bit more of tools around strategy and data analytics and things to be able to kind of use that to solve that problem. So I'm never going to say it's never, when you think about, yes, you're old in terms of perhaps the MBA student, but, at 36, God willing, you have more than half of your life still left. So that's plenty of time for you to, get into consulting. And sometimes the consulting firms, again, they do hire MBAs, but they also hire people who have specialty, masters in other areas and just a high level of expertise. So I would say, if there's a particular industry or issue that you are interested in, then, really dive deep into what you can bring to consulting, and then look at, again, do the research school by school to try to figure out how you can help make that transition. All right. So this was, I was sort of starting. And so again, I think I covered this pretty much. This was the example that I accidentally managed to talk about more than I meant, because we had so many people interested in investment banking. Here's another, this is a sort of a different kind of, this was a person who was actually at the younger end of their, I only had 2 years of work experience when I was working with them, and they had a biology background, but they were worked in a biotech firm prior to their MBA. They were in a customer success role, studied biology, wanted to pivot to work in product management at a biotech company. Their short-term goal was product management at Genentech. And we needed to help her find a program where she could gain experience, and kind of get a deep dive in healthcare and be ready for that transition. And so she ended up going to Fuqua and was in their health sector management program, which gave her really good overview of sort of, the landscape of healthcare recruiting, and was actually able to be successful making a transition. Now, it wasn't, a lot of times people, what they say and what they actually do is close, but it's not exactly the same. And so what she did in the short term is she didn't end up working in the short term in product management at a biotech, but she worked for a healthcare consulting firm where some of these biotech companies were her clients. And she was actually able, a few years later, to then successfully transition into working. She actually works at Genentech in sort of a strategic and operational role. So again, a school that just gives you, I remember her talking about, in that first week at Fuqua, she was able to get exposure to a whole bunch of different healthcare recruiting companies and kind of understand what she needed to do. She was able to do the Fuqua consulting practicum, and get experience working hands-on with a client in healthcare, in a marketing role. So again, you really, you just have to kind of, if it's we talk to our clients about this, it's like a math problem of, what it is that I have experience in and expertise. So, again, if you have some biology background, healthcare interest, plus what I don't have and what I need from my MBA, right? So if a person has this healthcare background and knowledge and wants to do investment banking, but doesn't have that, then, you need to build those financial modeling skills, understand, investment banking and the things that you're going to need to be doing. You're going to need to build your leadership, and, gain more just industry knowledge, right, from your MBA. And that equals, you coming out of your MBA with that investment banking associate role that you're seeking. So whatever it is that you have as, think about what it is that I have as expertise that would be useful. Again, and think about those levers. Do I have certain functional expertise? So I have finance knowledge, and I worked in automotive, but I want to work in healthcare. So then I want to learn more about healthcare as an industry in my MBA. If you have, again, you want to get into a different industry, leverage the functional skills that you have. If you want to do something different, you were in an accounting role and you want to move to more of a marketing role, but you have that CPG experience, packaged goods experience, then leverage the fact that you know that industry well, and it's a little bit easier to make that transition. Again, you can be flexible, perhaps in saying, I'm willing to go to any geography to be able to make that happen, or if I understand, startup culture and I've worked in startups, maybe I want to work in a different industry or a different function, but at least I am bringing to the table understanding what is really needed in terms of being able to do a wide variety of things in a startup. Another question here, let's see, from Harshita that says, I have a career gap of 4 to 5 months in mid-2023 due to relocating countries. I then worked for 5 months until last week, but unfortunately an injury has led me to quit. Well, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear that. And I think first and foremost, I'm praying that you get better, because, injury is, that's keeping you from working. First of all, financially, that's stressful, but also just you want to get back to full strength. I think that admissions committees, especially in all the things that have gone on with just living in a post-COVID world where we've had more examples of people for having to take some time off, or, having layoffs or whatever. I think as long as you explain, and again, you don't have to go into like sending your medical records or great depth, but just a couple sentences in maybe an optional essay as to what you're battling with and why you'll be ready to, hit the ground running by the time the program starts. These admissions people are humans, and they are, they're looking for reasons to help people be successful. So I would say that in itself is not something that you should stress about. I would say put your energy into getting well, and put your energy into doing research. And perhaps if you're, not actually working right now because of this injury, but you're able to do some research, this might be a good chance for you to, get some extra time to kind of look into different schools and look into what you really want to do. And this is a good segue, I think, to how can Stratus help you? And so, we have a lot of things. We work with people on a comprehensive packages. We work with people sometimes on something called application fundamentals and strategy, where we're actually just helping you kind of think about how you can best leverage making a transition and get yourself thinking about what kind of schools and what kind of career goals make sense for you. And then you do the applying on your own. So that's something that we offer. We have hourly, we do interview prep. We sometimes work with people, a year prior to applying, and just kind of give them some tips on how they can best leverage their extracurriculars and be planning so that they're ready to go. Again, we're here we'll do free consultations with people. You can see on the screen a link to that, and a link to how to reach out to Stratus. We're also doing a webinar on the 12th, so not too far from now, but what you can be doing now to prepare for round 1 2024 for those of you who are planning ahead and looking at that. I want to jump back in here and look at I do have someone else's jump back. I do have 4 years of work experience, and an MBA has always been in the cards. Thank you. So, well, that's great. I think that I have to say, and I check in with my clients, so when I work with someone, I don't just work with them, during the time that they're applying to business school. I also care about them, and I just kind of like to follow their career. And it also gives me a lot of great insights as to how people have made successful transitions. But I really have seen, I've got to say, I'm pretty bullish on the value of an MBA and the value of people being able to really transport themselves into a new situation, and a situation where they're really happy. Most of my clients, if they don't do they might not do exactly what they said in their goals, but the schools know this. And this is something where schools know that if you've done the thinking to kind of say, what is it that I think I want to do with the information that I know right now? And then, then you go through your MBA program and you learn new things. You're able to, if you've done it once, then you can do it again. And, it's a series of refining. And quite frankly, it's a series of refining that you're going to do throughout your career, because I'm also actually just took a call from one of my clients I had several years ago who worked in her family had a business where they were manufacturing drug components in the HIV space. And she was actually looking to make a transition then into VC and working with other, investing in other early stage companies. And so we talked about, okay, well, how can you tweak your resume to kind of, pivot and emphasize the roles that you had on sort of board of directors and advising companies and, your connections to entrepreneurs. So it's always something that, as you go through the course of your career, you're going to need to kind of, tweak, and you might have new interests, and how can you leverage what you've done in the past? So this process of learning how to leverage expertise to sort of make a new change is something that you're going to kind of rinse and repeat throughout your career. So the sooner you get comfortable making that transition and being comfortable being able to sort of, convince someone that you can make a transition. But MBA programs are, very aware that people, in part why you're going to get an MBA is because you're not 100% sure that, you want to do something different. And that is fine. But schools really do appreciate when people make the effort to kind of think about how they think their process might go, as opposed to someone who just says, I don't know what I want to do, and now I want to get an MBA. And that is not a good look. And so you want to do a little bit more than that. And I always see a new question from Usama, and I'm sorry if I've got that, if I didn't say that right, but I'm a chartered accountant in the UK. I'm 33. Second lower class. I have 4 years of work experience with Ernst & Young. I want to transition to strategic and management consulting. So I think, well, first of all, the fact that you have some, experience now, granted, you're not doing, you're not doing management consulting, but like you're at least doing some consulting and you're leveraging your financial experience. So it may be that, if you were looking to go into consulting, you might want to think about looking in, working in financial services industry and perhaps leveraging some of the expertise you have there. I think that you may want to look at indirect tax department. So again, then the fact that you have tax expertise, that could be helpful in, again, in financial services industry. I think that, and the fact that your age, the age you are, you're kind of in that range where you could look at executive MBA programs. And you could also be looking at being on the older side of full-time MBA programs. And there's pros and cons actually of that. I don't have the link right here. Maybe I could get it. In our Stratus blog, if you look at our Stratus blog, or if you Google in sort of transition or reasons of kind of deciding between getting a full-time MBA or getting a executive MBA and the pros and cons of that, we have a nice article on that. And so I might be able to, I'm not sure if I can, I'm a little bit afraid to change a browser, but anyway, that's, I'd say that that's certainly a possibility that you could make that change. And I think part of it is just thinking about, lifestyle wise. And what about the lower second class honors? Obviously the longer you're away from your grades, the less it matters. So if you've had a great trajectory, in your career, and you had good promotions and good, professional experience. And especially in executive MBA programs, I would say that the, how you did is less important. One thing that you could do certainly is think about and be honest. Why is it that you didn't do as well as you could have in your undergrad? And is that just because I have a client now. He had a lot of, he came in with a lot of transfer credits. And he decided to, his first couple of courses in college were like the second chemistry, the second accounting, things like that. And so he just struggled a little bit in the beginning because he was taking really challenging courses, and he may not have been as prepared as he thought. So his grades in the beginning were a little bit lower. So that is a case where, you just say, like, you're not making excuses, but you just give the context of that's what's going on. Or some people I truly just wasn't, I really wasn't, I didn't have the passion for knowing what I wanted to study, and I was just distracted. Or in some cases, it could be someone who's I got wide-eyed and bug-eyed to get involved in all kinds of clubs. And, I spread myself too thin, and I've since learned how to manage. And, you can see that through the example of my work, how I've done better. So I think that, again, nobody's perfect. And if your grades are not so great, then, certainly a good GMAT or GRE score could help make up for that. Going and taking a course, some graded coursework in the areas that are important for business schools to look at, like, financial accounting or microeconomics or statistics or calculus, if you haven't had calculus, and in getting a good grade and saying, I can, I've sort of grown. But really, the longer you've been away from school, the less your grades matter. And then I had a question here, even with a very good GMAT, like 99 percentile. Is 655 GMAT focus good enough for an MBA? So, because you're in the, it's all new. I believe, and I'm not looking at the sort of tables in front of me to kind of translate that, but I believe it's a GMAT score that could give you some, get you some traction. People have to get used to these new numbers and scales that are different. But I would say, and actually this is where one year where perhaps people are a little bit at a disadvantage, where you can't go back and look at, you can't go back and look at like a class profile. They're not going to have a GMAT focus on there. But what you can do is you can look at those tables that are available to see how the percentages translate, and then just look at, okay, well, if my 655 GMAT focus is kind of like, 700 in the old GMAT, then, and I'm not saying that is, but that's just hypothetically, then let's go back and look at the class profile for those schools and see where I would fit. So I would do that. I think we're running close to the top of the hour, and I really appreciate all the questions because that's, hopefully most helpful. I'm trying to, give people some feedback and some inspiration. And I hope that I've inspired you through some of these examples. I've seen a lot of people make some really great transitions through their MBA. And if it's something that you want to do, I think you have to just do a combination of kind of, again, thinking about what it is that you have, industry knowledge, functional knowledge, geography knowledge, company size knowledge, whatever. And then how can I kind of take what I know and then look at what I still need. And again, I can't underscore enough how important it is to just do that sort of legwork, do that due diligence for yourself of, finding out what the culture is like at certain firms, looking at and talking to MBA ambassadors and finding out what schools, where people are really saying, hey, there's a good percentage of people who are able to make a successful transition. Just looking also at your, at the number of people going into an area. So looking at the employment reports. I was just did an article for Stratus where we were looking at, what are some of the best programs to make a transition into CPG, and if you wanted to do that. And I went to Kellogg, so I'm a little biased there. Kellogg is a great place for CPG and marketing, but they had so many people who were interested in doing it. So then a lot of the class was, in some form or fashion, working in a marketing role or working in CPG. Really interesting courses, really interesting extra, things like the Super Bowl ad review that Kellogg's professors do every year. Just a wide variety of courses. Really interesting, like ethnographic customer marketing. The course that's taught there that's very popular at Kellogg. So again, just diving into the details to see, okay, is this a place where I'm going to be able to thrive, where there's going to be a lot of people that are also wanting to make this transition. So I'll have a good cohort of people to learn from and to sort of, strategize and plan with. So I think that's important. I don't see any other questions, and we are getting close here to the top of the hour. So again, we're happy at Stratus to talk to you about do a free consultation. You can sign up on our website. You can see the link there. Happy to give you more individual information about your profile that way. Come to some of our webinars that we do. We have a lot of great articles on our website that you can really learn a lot, and use this time of year to do your research, talk to people, talk to student ambassadors, and know that you can, if it's something you want to do, you can do it. And we are rooting for you all the way. All right. So I don't know if we're going to, let's see, I'm going to just stand for another sec, but I think I think that's kind of a wrap on this topic for me today. And just wishing all of you the best of luck in making that transition. And I'm sure that you can if you put your mind to it.